I just want to welcome everybody. This is our new course, our next 4-week course on uh, sort of highlights of interfaith exchange and relationship. Rabbi Lazar has a very interesting and rich history in terms of his work with many other faith communities around the globe. When I first met him, that was what he was talking about in my community. And he will, over the course of the next 4 weeks, share that. But it feels, you know, for me, I asked him if he would be willing to bring us together this morning just so that we can come together with our concerns and our sadness. David's an Israeli citizen. His children live there, many of his children. And so I'm going to turn this over to him. And if we may be able to, there will be a connection to our topic at hand. But this feels like the right way to begin.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Rabbi Marsha. I'd like to encourage those that are not on camera. I understand there's different situations, but if you're able to be so, it's so much easier to have a conversation and to feel like that we're really together. So if you're able to turn on your camera, I'd encourage you to do so. If you can't, I totally understand. It's difficult to talk in these days, as I'm sure you know. I feel a little bit in a different camp than most of my rabbinic colleagues in North America. I see what they're writing on Facebook. I've been in touch with some of them. As someone who lived in Israel for most of my adult life, 36 years, I'm 66 now, 36 years from age 18, actually a year of high school, in fact. And with 4 of our 5 daughters, 6 of our 8 grandchildren there, and that kind of history, I'm woven into Israeli society in a way that is a little bit different for Americans visiting. We just heard somebody has a cousin. That's of course a concern. People have friends. There's all sorts of connections, but for me, it's the knowledge of Hebrew. It's the going back to looking at flicking between the channels, so to speak, on my laptop between the different news stations in Israel that are, of course, broadcasting 24 hours, and this is all they're broadcasting. It's beginning to see the video from funerals and see the lists of names, and you look at the names because eventually you're going to know one of them. And the more I've been away, and I have been away now since 2010, essentially, is when we moved to Sweden. There's less names, less involvement, but still, this is something that affects so many people at the basic personal level as it affects us, checking in on our daughters that live there as well and friends. It's on an existential level, as far as Israel is concerned, I'm not an alarmist. I'm really not. I'm not the kind of person that says that this is the end of the world, even with Trump, even with Bibi. That's not my style. And this is not the end of the world, and it's not the end of Israel, but this is deep. This is the deepest it's ever been in my lifetime, certainly as an Israeli. And although people felt this kind of trauma before the 6-day war, before it was clear what was happening, and certainly in the Yom Kippur War, the 2 years, 3 years that it was going on, people felt a sense of deep fear during the 2 intifadas. Those were the kind of riotous days of lots of bombs. The second intifada in particular, which connects us to our story today and the text that I wanted to do, that hopefully we'll do some. In a moment, we'll open this up for people to express themselves and ask questions, but to express themselves more than anything else. In all those days, the threat was external, meaning that there were threats in the borders, and the army was involved in a fight. This is the worst nightmare of not just an incursion of a few terrorists, a terrorist or a few terrorists, the things that we dealt with for years, and I did with when I was in the military as well. This massive attack, it's a jolt to who Israel is and what can be expected from the government and what can be expected from the army. And while some of the newscasters, both in Israel and even one particular one I saw on CNN, I don't remember her name, late last night, they continually hammer away at people at this stage as to how could this possibly happen. The standard comment you'll get is, that's a good question, but this is not the time, right? And this is not the time. On one hand, it's not the time. On the other hand, we need to learn. We need to learn in every situation. The military needs to learn right now what to do, and that's not. I don't understand that. I don't know what's going on, but the Israeli citizens need to know as well. And many of us see this situation as a culmination of decades of particular policies. So that's in the back. That's what makes it difficult. And other people here will have very different views. What's difficult for me personally, and this I am sharing personally, this is an important message for me to get across, is the automatic go-to that we as Jews have always suffered and now we're suffering again. It's far more complex than that. Far more complex. And yes, we are paying a huge price in lives, and we're paying a huge price in hostages and trauma, but there are many people on the other side that are paying the same or worse prices, and they had nothing to do with what's happened right now. It is way too simple to say the Palestinians of Gaza should have done away with Hamas. It doesn't work that way. And so what I'm making this point is that when we have compassion and we say our prayers for the wounded and for the kidnapped and for the killed, that we leave some space in our hearts for those children, make it easier for people, okay? So for the children, for the elderly, for the women, the mothers in Gaza, that they too are going through pain and suffering. Now, I am not saying that needs to necessarily influence the army and how they go about retaliation and attacks. That's not what I'm saying right now. What I'm saying is that we as Jews, we as Israelis, we cannot lose our compassion, our ability to have compassion. Maybe it's constricted at this point for that particular population, but we cannot lose it. Once we lose that, then I feel that we're on the path to losing the game. And I'm not saying we've lost, and I'm not saying this is the end. That's not my point at all. I'm saying, though, that this is the most difficult time for Israel that at least I've, and Sasha, my wife, who's here with us, has ever experienced.
So sorry. And that's, I think, what's really sinking in for all of us now. You know, when you first hear that there's, bombs coming or something, the natural thing that happens to the mind is you go to your past experiences, and I do remember in 91 when do you know what I'm when George Bush Sr. was president. I mean, that also felt like another very scary time, that the thought that Tel Aviv might be blown to smithereens or something like that. I mean, that's sort of in my memory the last time it wasn't sort of a routine defense thing where a few people might have been injured. This feels so different, and also so much more sophisticated on the part of the guerrilla warriors. And it is, I guess, I guess that's where it's impossible to know, for me, sort of how deep the cancer is, like in terms of how to really protect Israeli citizens fully. And I guess, do you have any thoughts about that? Or
yeah, what you're referring to, 91, was the first Gulf, what we call the first Gulf War, and it's when Saddam Hussein began to send missiles over to Israel. That was that time. I mean, that was when civilian populations began to be in danger, or endangered in that particular way that they are today, in a far more sophisticated way, of course. And that, we had to seal up I had to have a sealed room with plastic because we were afraid of germ warfare, and I was taken to the army on emergency draft, like you've heard about so many 300,000 that have been drafted now or recruited from the reserves in the last 2 days. So my unit was taken for that, but I don't think any of us thought it was a disturbance. It was something to worry about. We thought maybe that Jordan would come across and side with there were a lot of rumors and things flying up in the air, and I was just a member of a tank crew. We didn't really know much, but all I knew that I was away from my family for 3 weeks, and we had little babies at home as well. And so that wasn't traumatic for us in the same way, not for us living there. Do you feel that was traumatic, Sasha? It was something from Milchemet HaMifratz. It was
traumatic at the time.
Yeah.
I was just remembering sitting in the sealed room with our gas masks on.
Right. So Sasha's saying that it was traumatic at the time because she, mostly because I was in the army, was on her own every time there was an alarm with these 5 little girls, 8, 7, and 6, and less than a year, in gas masks and in these tents that they had for the infants. And that was traumatic at the time, but I don't know that left a scar on our souls as much.
No, what left a scar on all our girls is the fear of the explosions of the buses.
What Sasha is saying is what left a scar on the souls of our daughters were the explosions especially in the second Intifada 10 years later, right, the beginning of the aughts of the 2000s. But even then it was not to make it any worse, but any less. But then it was one person. It was a suicide terrorist. It was a bomb that was left. It wasn't. We're talking about well over 1,000 armed Palestinian Hamas men coming across the border and still coming. As of I didn't check the Israeli media this morning. I don't have the strength for it, but so. It is traumatic, and what we need to recognize is very traumatic, and it's far more complicated than saying I stand with Israel. It's just far more complicated than that. And I know where it comes from. I know because many people in their everyday life, they have that contra of the very, very left narrative and the Palestinian anti-Israel narrative that's what they're confronting. And I know. I'm not friends with those people so much on Facebook, so I don't see their media. I don't see the social media, but I see the reaction to it. And I see my Jewish progressive friends saying, please don't say on Facebook, on media, on social media, I defend Israel's right to exist, but no buts. My message is, I don't put those things on social media. I'm not an official spokesperson for really anybody other than Or Midbar, which is a very small community in Palm Springs. So I'm not an anybody here when it comes to speaking out for the Jewish people, but it's just really complex. And sometimes it's best to do the work without saying that you're doing it. And doing the work without saying is being in touch, like somebody shared with us just a moment ago. I don't know who it was. Was it you, Sandra? About your cousin? Was that you?
Yes.
Yeah. So
her family and children. Yes.
So it's being in touch with them, but also recognizing that perhaps they don't have the strength right now. I'm not talking to you, Sandra. I'm talking to everybody. They don't have the strength to get back to you because everybody and their sister around the world and everybody's interconnected wants to know what's happening. I tried to have a lot of strength for that, and I'm not even there, right? But so. It's all of us taking a deep breath and going to prayer. I'm going to offer a prayer in a moment after we get some reactions from folks here. It's turning to prayer. It's turning to being together. It's having conversations, not keeping it locked up inside. It's going, if you understand Hebrew, if you can listen to spoken Hebrew, it's going to, I would suggest, Khan 11 or the channel 12 in Israel. If you can't, to my mind, the best source of information right now is Times of Israel. I'm very, very doubtful about I-24. I recently discovered it on my TV the other night when I was looking for something. And it's very, very unprofessional in so many ways. And it's not a political motivation. There is a definite political motivation there, but that's not what I'm talking about. But Times of Israel is far more responsible in it, I feel, professional from a media point of view. And there's a lot on CNN. I'm actually quite surprised that this has taken up basically 98% of CNN, it seems like, any hour. So I'm happy to open up the floor for people to speak their minds or to ask questions, whatever you like. Marsha, I'll let you facilitate this.
No, I just wanted to create this space, for people, if they wanted to process. I thought that Rabbi Lazar would be an excellent person to share your thoughts, concerns. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? If not, we can certainly embark on our lesson for today.
I'll just say, I think a lot of you know that my daughter and her family live in Israel. And it's been really tense, as Rabbi David said. So many emails come into her and so many phone calls. I know that because of how many have come to me, and I'm so grateful. I'm sure she's grateful, but it is very difficult for her to talk now. And I have not spoken to her. It's only been through text. It's just overwhelming. They lost a very, very good friend's son in the army. It was infiltrated and they were just all shot dead. And the funeral was, I guess this started Thursday, I guess their Thursday, and the funeral was Friday. And the kid was very close friends with my daughter's kids. So it's been hard. I did want to say one more thing. I tend to watch MSNBC a lot, and I know I stopped watching CNN because of what happened with Caitlin Collins and Trump. So I stopped watching it. Their coverage is really far superior. MSNBC, I don't know what to say. I can't watch because sometimes the people who I like so much are of a different persuasion. Like, and as David was saying, we have to, it's just difficult to watch from what they're saying because they are talking from the Palestinian point of view. And my heart goes out, like David said, to the Palestinians, but my heart goes out larger, fortunate or unfortunate, with my Israeli family. It's difficult.
I just want to acknowledge what you said. First of all, thank you for sharing that, Rosalie. And you've given voice. You've actually articulated what I was having a hard time expressing to my husband this morning. I want to write to my friends in Israel, and and I know that everybody's writing to them. I'm not a Facebook person. I don't read that kind. I don't know, and I didn't want to say, please let me know how you're doing or whatever, because I'm sure they're just inundated completely. And so I was feeling both that distance and that desire for connection, and it was very complicated. And I'm sure it's just overwhelming and utterly traumatic for residents.
It is. You're right. I have not spoken to my daughter. It's only text. She cannot. It's too much to talk about it. And she's got 3 kids, but 2 of them are the age, they're late teens. So one is going in the army next year and one's got, 2 more years, and it's very close to comfort.
Where are they living, Rosalie?
Sur Hadassah.
And Sur Hadassah just lost one of their boys. Is that you? Yeah, one of their sons.
That's the one. Yeah. They're tight. The kids are tight with him, the family.
As is their former rabbi, who's a friend of mine. Yeah.
Stacy?
No, before that, Ofer.
Ofer, I remember.
Ofer's a student of mine. Yeah. All right, so
Thank
one
you.
one of the things that I think that both of you have brought up is how may we support? There'll be a time for people gathering money and everything, and already Magen David Adom, the Israeli, Red Star of David, whatever it's called, the Israeli Red Cross. There'll be a time to do those kinds. The ISIS federations are already mobilizing. You'll make your decision as to how you want to do that. But as far as a person to person, the best, I think, Rabbi Marsha, is a WhatsApp message. I'm thinking of you. I love you. If it's appropriate for that person, you're in my prayers. But a one line, not expecting an answer, not asking a question. Yes, Rosalie.
I'm sorry.
I'm
Sandra.
sorry. Yes, Sandra, go ahead.
I think it's interesting because I think it's like we are all thinking the same thing when I was thinking of calling. This is last night, and I'm looking at what the times are in Israel, and I'm going, she must be getting a million calls. Should I call? Of course, I want to call to find out, how my family is. And she has children and grandchildren. She's been in Israel for a very long time. And, but it was my same thought that you all were having is, she must be overwhelmed with calls. And then when I actually called and she was, it was like she was in New York and it was 1:40 in the morning. Like, oh my God. So, but still, I'm not sure where everybody else is. And it's very scary.
But don't be silent, though.
So that's why I called.
No, but so that's what we have message. That's tech. Let's learn from the younger generation, people younger than most of us here, right?
Right.
They don't call anymore. It's only text. In this case, this is a good situation. Texts are really important.
Yes, I agree. And I heard from somebody else, a second cousin who lived for a long time in Israel and is in Michigan now. And she posted a picture of a family that was kidnapped, and she knew she knew these people. It's not like they're not, they're just out there. It's happening to other people. It's not happening to other people. We all have connections.
Yeah.
In one way or the other. So thank you.
So
Thank you for this outlet
Hmm.
to be able to talk. Appreciate it.
Mishaberach Avoteinu Avraham v'Sarai, Yitzchak v'Rivka, Yaakov Rachel v'Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all those who are under fire, who have been taken hostage, who have been wounded, who are mourning those who are dead, who fear that their homes will be invaded, that their children will be taken away from them, who bear the trauma of Jewish history in their bones, in their DNA. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu heal them, strengthen them, instruct us in the ways that we can be helpful, that we can show our support without being a burden, without it being about us. May God grant us compassion, not only for our own people, but for the other. May God send wisdom to those who are leading our people, both in the government and in the military. May God send courage and strength to those soldiers who are putting their lives on the line so that the Jewish people will continue to have a homeland. May we learn from this when it's over. May God guide us in finding ways for peaceful coexistence. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, al kol Yisrael, al kol shechinenu, al kol yoshvei tevel. May the one who has created this universe with the stars that don't collide into each other, with our nature on earth, which each and every plant and animal coexist. May the God who created that peace and that order show us how to do so in our own lives as human beings, for ourselves, for our communities, for our people of Israel, for our neighbors, and for all humanity. And let us say Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Do you feel able, David, to teach some Torah in
Yeah, just a moment. Need to dry things up a bit. For those that didn't see the text this morning, some of you don't know me. The folks from Palm Springs were with us. They're used to my show of emotion, and I'm comfortable with it. And then I move on to what we're doing. So please don't see that if you don't know me. That's not me being crass or me being insensitive. It's It's just my rabbinic ability to compartmentalize. So yeah, Marcia, in talking a few months ago, said, wouldn't it be nice for you to share your own experiences of interfaith dialogue with the folks in JCOC? Many of these stories, experiences, these anecdotes, these texts I've shared with others in Study It's Who I Am. In that way, I'm totally not compartmentalized. I'm all over the place when it comes to teaching, as those of you who have studied with me know. It's often a stream of consciousness from one source to another, from one idea to another, from one story to another. And while I'm comfortable with that as well, and on one hand, I'm proud of that, and it allows me to show off what I've learned over the years, the decades of study, it also does not necessarily make for a focused lecture and point, and if somebody's walking away and say, well, what exactly, sum up in one line, what did he say? Well, that's a problem. So in one line, what I want to say is that in order for us to bring about peaceful coexistence in the world, we need to understand the other. I think that's one sentence. Rabbi Jack Cohn of blessed memory, who was Mordechai Kaplan's, one of his very closest students, Mordechai Kaplan, who founded the Reconstructionist movement, or was founded around him, I should say. And Jack Cohn moved in the 50s already to Israel to be the rabbi of the Hillel at Hebrew University, which is an interesting concept. But he's written about, mostly in Hebrew, about Rav Kook and Rabbi, doesn't matter. I'm going off too much. But basically, Jack Cohn said to me after my first sermon, so to speak, at Mevakshei Derech, he's one of the founders of the synagogue that I was going to. He said, interesting, wonderful show of knowledge, but I'm going to share with you what Kaplan said to me after my first sermon. I think it was a student sermon at JTS. He said, if you can't sum it up in one sentence, you're trying to say too much. So here, I've summed it up in one sentence. I'll still try to say too much, I'm sure. But that is what I want. That in the next 4 weeks, this is my message. We cannot expect peaceful resolution between human beings without understanding the other's way of life. And this goes for not just religion. I happen to be clergy, so I'm interested in religion. I happen to be a person involved in religion. But this goes really for everything in life. It goes for the conflict in Israel. It goes for Trump versus Biden, or everything that implies. It goes for so much. So it's about listening. And the story begins in the Second Intifada. In 2001, bombs were going off in Jerusalem all the time. I had a problem and I needed some surgery or procedure done, so I was in medical challenge, and I haven't had that many medical challenges in my life. There had been a drought for many years in Israel, and I was a farmer, and I will mention this now because it's appropriate for the time I was a farmer in the Gaza Strip. Sasha and I were part of we started a moshav in a place called Netzarim in the old days. We were there from 80 to 82, so don't have any close knowledge of what Gaza has become, but I do know the geography, making it more difficult in some ways and easier in some ways for me to understand the situation right now. And but this was years later, and I still felt as a farmer, the farmer in me felt the pain of the drought, same way that many of us felt here in California until this last year, but even more so because it's such a small country. And there's nowhere, can't always bring things from the outside. And then I got a letter from Hebrew University saying that if I don't hand in the first chapter of my PhD dissertation by October 31st, I think it was October 31st, then I won't be able to stay in the doctoral program. So all these things converge upon me, and I say to my chavruta, my study partner, Rabbi Levi Wyman Kelman, I say, I got to do something. What I'm like in an existential kind of a crack up here. I need to find a place to write. I need to work on the dissertation. And we already had cell phones, right? It's 2001, and there's email. There's too many distractions. There's the kids. There's the intifada. Everything's going on. He says, you know what? You should go to Taizé. I never heard of Taizé. And he said, I went to this place when I had finished rabbinical school on my way to Israel. I was a student, and my father was close with Heschel, and Heschel got some cardinal to call them and said, yes, you're welcome to come. And he said, this place is great. There's prayer. You'll be able to have time to write. It'll be quiet for you. It's in the hillsides of Burgundy, France. And so on the spot, he turned around, swiveled the chair, wrote an email to the brothers, to two of them that he was in contact or they knew, and like within an hour we got a response saying, he said, yes, we'd love to welcome your friend Rabbi David. And so I went with lots of books and my laptop and not much else to France. I asked Sasha if I could get away and she said, please get away. You're really difficult right now. And I went to this place and I was nervous and I didn't spend Shabbat there. The first Shabbat I spent it in a hotel in a village nearby, in a city nearby, Bonn. I don't know French. So the whole thing was a little bit overwhelming, and I was still pretty strict about Shabbat. I was strict about Shabbat observance, paid for everything beforehand. I get to Taizé on the Sunday, and I see young people all around, walking up the paths in the village, and I'm looking. Where's, like, I'm expecting a big monastery, a big building with a castle-like building, and I hadn't done much research. I just went, it was kind of anyway, I get to the welcome and they say, what country are you from? I said, I'm from Israel. So they looking through their computer printouts, and there's a section called Middle East, and there's Lebanon, and there's three names, Lebanon, and then there's Israel and my name. And they say, oh, okay, this is where you're supposed to go. And still, I haven't spoken to anybody. This is all these volunteers, these young people. I get there, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I see there's prayer. I sit down in the prayer, and there are 5,000 young people at least, that some camped out, some in dorms, but in this huge church that opens up with accordion doors like lots of our synagogues do. It can fit, I think, over 6,000 when it's totally open. And I heard the most beautiful prayer I'd ever heard in my life. You walk in, there's people asking you to be quiet. Nobody's talking. Can you imagine a shul where nobody's talking before davening starts? I've never seen such a place. There's always talking. Everybody's quiet. And we're talking about thousands of people. They're sitting on the floor. And slowly trickle in the brothers who are in their white habits in the center area where most of them have stools for kneeling. Some of the older monks have chairs. There's absolute silence until somebody strikes a note, sings a note. And the whole place filled up with song in languages, some in Latin, but French and German and Polish and English. With time over the years, I'll tell you that I'm still in touch, and I'll be there in December for a very special occasion. But with time, even in Hebrew, I'll take a little bit of credit for that. They believe that the way to reach humanity in their own Christian way, and this is an ecumenical Christian monastery, this is not a Catholic order. There are those who've been ordained as Roman Catholic priests, but there are those that come from Protestant backgrounds as well, and Orthodox backgrounds. There are about 100 brothers there. At any given time, 15, 20 are away in different places around the world where they've chosen to make a presence, to heal. For a while, they were amongst the Lakota people in North Dakota. One of my close friends there was in New York, one of the very bad areas in New York for years, which now is not so bad. In Africa, one of my friends, who's the brothers, has been he's South Korean. He went back to South Korea to work. And the prayer is probably about 40 minutes long. Of that, there is song. There is, in different languages, it's accompanied by music. It's played by a keyboard that sounds like a guitar. It's very soft. It's very intense. And there's a period of silence. You know, to this day, I don't know how long it goes on for. Beginning, I thought it went on for 20 minutes. Then I realized it couldn't be so. But there's silence. Everybody is silent. Can you imagine a synagogue where everybody would be silent for more than a minute, 2 minutes? This had such a deep effect on me. And I was going to be there for 2 weeks. I was going to get some writing done. I'll fast forward to say, not only did I get almost no writing done there, I didn't finish the PhD because at some point I decided that I'm more of a in-the-field rabbi than I am a scholar in that way. But that summer in Taizé, that week that I did spend there, left a huge impression on my soul. In fact, I left because I felt I needed to get some work done. And once it got out that there was a rabbi there, everybody wanted to talk to me. People would stop me. They've never met I've never met a Jew before, let alone a rabbi. People from all sorts of places, mostly in Europe, not from cities necessarily. Why am I saying all this? The song, the prayer that most affected me there in that visit was this. Laudate omnis gentes, laudate Dominum, laudate omnis gentes, laudate Dominum. Latin. The truth of the matter is simple Latin, as opposed to some of the songs that are in Italian and Polish and other languages that I can't get my tongue wrapped around. But that one I could get, especially after I saw what the meaning was. Laudate, praise, the command form of praise in Latin. Omnis gentes, all you people, all peoples of the world. Laudate Dominum, praise God, Dominum. And when I saw that it was based on Psalm 117, and all this is going on in my head in this first prayer, because I'm so fascinated by this, and I know the book of Psalms pretty well. And my favorite psalm had been when I was in the army. I had always wanted to say a psalm by heart when we went out on patrol, when we went out and training, whatever it was in dangerous situations. And I always said, Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim, Shabhu kol haomim, ki gava aleinu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam, hallelujah. It's the shortest of the Psalms. And it's in the Hallel, it's before Hodu. And this is what those words were. And then I saw already in that first visit, not in the first day, I saw, because I do this, I'm constantly stealing other traditions, music, and putting them to Jewish prayer, to Hebrew prayer. I saw that it works beautifully. Hallelujah et Adonai kol goyim shabchu kol ha'umim ki gavar aleinu chasto ve'emet Adonai le'olam. Hallelujah. Now, each of these chants go on 10, 15 times. They're all very simple. And part of the day, the daily schedule is for newbies to go to music class, to learn the songs. And these kids, Europeans, they still have music. Many of them still have music class in high school or in school. Most of them seem to know how to read notes. Most Americans and Israelis can't do that, right? And what I found over the week that I was there, and then I basically visited every year until the Intifada. I felt so close with these guys and so at home there in prayer, and learned so much on every visit. I went back the next year, and the year after, I made it possible for my students. I funded trips for them to go and experience a week there, sometimes more. And because what I realized was, this was the best example of religious, pluralistic education that I had ever seen. The organization I was running, Rikma, was all about religious pluralism and training rabbis of different backgrounds and different movements. That's how I know Ofer, who was the rabbi in Sur Hadassah. It was through that program. I recruited him to that program. I ran it for 17 years, this fellowship, and those were the first 2 years. And I was looking for models of religious pluralism that we could use in Israel. This was, for those of you that know BCI, right, Brandeis in California, this was that on steroids. It was so, the church had icons in it. You may know that Protestants don't always have icons depending on what denomination, but lots of icons, Eastern Orthodox, Western Orthodox icons. Had an area of the garden outside where there were domes like Russian churches where people could meditate, styles of music, the backgrounds, the languages. Every day is prayer, first thing in the morning, then breakfast, and the young people are broken into groups. They act like a kibbutz. They take turns cleaning and cooking, and they have a job for the week. There are those that stay for 3 months and they get more involved in different things. The brothers, they teach classes, the Torah study, I will call it. It's Bible study in the morning. Then they break into groups and they have a little like charuta. They study, they have sheets with questions on it. All the things that we're used to seeing, right? They've been doing. Now, what most struck me was that Levi, my friend, made it sound like this is a quiet monastery. This was anything from that. It's just that things had changed drastically in the 20 years since he had been there. And this became the center for Christian renewal in Europe and in many places of the world. Not only for those that visit, but those that use the music. And many of you have heard of Taizé music before. You may have seen a church that has a Taizé service once a month, a healing service. What Karlebach is in the Jewish world, Taizé is in the Christian world. And it goes past all denominations. You'll find that music. So I want to take a look at that psalm. That's the experience. Just a moment. I want to share that experience, take a look at the psalm, and then share with you another experience I had at the end of that first week I was there. I felt a little strange. Here I am, a rabbi with certain accomplishments. They hadn't a clue who I was, right? And one of the brothers, every time I opened up my eyes, I happened to be sitting opposite him. Every time, and I had my back on a wall to help my sitting. Every time I opened up my eyes, I saw he was looking at me, and I felt pretty self-conscious about that. And I think he's trying to think, like, who the hell is this guy? What's he doing? With this kippah. Now, this was before. With years, once I felt comfortable with it after a few years, then instead of davening in my room beforehand, I came in and put on my talit and tefillin in there, and that's how it is today. And everybody expects that. And Anyway, so we'll get in a sec. We'll get to the text in a second, and then but first, Rabbi Marshall, you wanted to say something.
So I'm thinking about, that kind of experience and that sort of immersive soaking in the beauty of liturgy through music. And since you came there in 2001, of course, Levi, back then, has there been any kind of interest among your colleagues? I mean, do Jewish people go now with a different kind of, or
Yeah, there are some rabbis
not
that
normal, and how do you get there?
yeah. So there are some rabbis that have visited. No, it's not a place that the regular rank and file Jew would think to go, even after hearing me talk about it. You've got to get there. You can get there by public transportation. It's pretty convoluted. I'm spoiled, and I often just rent a car at Charles de Gaulle, and I drive down. It's about a 3.5, 4 hour drive. I love driving through France. I can help anybody that wants to. I can help them make arrangements. But I mean, because I was in a nonprofit that was devoted, amongst other things, to interfaith dialogue. That was part of our mission statement. Although we hadn't really done much, so we wanted to do. I was able to. I had funding always to get there, right, and to even pay for part of my stay there. I kind of insisted over the years of paying. It's not a lot of money, but paying for the days that I'm there to the. Yeah, but there are some rabbis. There's a young rabbi, Masorti rabbi in Paris, who was in the army with our daughters in the youth movement, and he has spent a bunch of time there. Levi hasn't gone back twice. I think I brought him back for his 50th birthday. I insisted that he come with me. Went back with Paula, and then there were Rikma fellows, probably 5 or 6. Once we went the Israeli youth movement. Masorti Youth Movement, Noam, we organized their leadership with our daughter Debbie, who's now a rabbi in Jerusalem. And we were scheduled to go with some Palestinian Catholics from the old city. And to have a 3-way meeting there, a small group. We prepared it quite a bit. And they're supposed to leave Saturday night. The Thursday night before they're supposed to leave, my travel agent called me, and this is the only time. He says, I totally messed up. I didn't realize that even though they have a blue ID card in the old city in Jerusalem, they don't have an automatic visa, and there's no way to get them visas on time. So we went without the Palestinians, but we did spend a week there, including Shabbat, and making challah and doing Kabbalat Shabbat together with this small group in this very, very intense dialogue, which I wasn't sitting with. It was they're very much into having the young people do their own thing. Not controlled. Yes, Rita Claire.
It sounds so magical, David. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. And I always wondered how you got to Taizé, and I love knowing the background story. So, do you want me to bring up the source sheet on the?
Yeah, I think Rita Claire wanted to ask or say something.
Yes, of course.
There's one word that keeps echoing in my brain as you're talking, and that's respect. Respect and the willingness to learn from other people.
Yeah, thank you. I made lots and lots of notes of thinking, preparing, and where they would go in each of these 4-part series. And the next one will be about Islam. The next one will be about Hinduism and Buddhism. I may put them together because we're not going to get all that much done today. And the last one will be about Palm Springs, what's going on, because I'm very, very proud and very excited about everything we've accomplished in the last 8 years here, my colleagues and I want to bring others into the circle. But one of the Levi and I were part of an interfaith dialogue group in Jerusalem, and it wasn't very satisfying. And I'll talk about that later today or next time, and I'll explain why it wasn't it wasn't fulfilling. But one of the rabbis who was there with us, and we were discussing it afterwards, he said to Levi, and I could easily say he said it to me because he just didn't really know me at the time. Afterwards, we became friends because it turned out he had been a rabbi in Sweden as well, and he knew what I had gone through. And so he said, Levi, you are religious, you are spiritually promiscuous. And so I've adopted that for myself as well. I'm spiritually committed. So it's even, Rita Claire, it's even a little bit beyond respect. It's not just respect and open this way, it's actually taking that step into and going to Taizé and going to the church. And with time, I was there once with Rabbi Eli Spitz, and we talked about, I had this kind of red line. One red line, it still is in a church, and I'll get to that as well, is I don't take communion. And there are many churches where I'm invited to take communion. I kind of think that's a red line. That may change in the future for various reasons, and I'll tell you where it stands right now when we get to Palm Springs. It's another red line was not singing the Jesus words in liturgy. Jesus Christ our Lord, all those kind of things. Like, I'm a big one on meaning what you pray and praying what you mean in Hebrew. And in the conversation with Eli, with Rabbi Spitz, we both came to the conclusion, well, we're not accepting Christ as Redeemer when we say those words. We're not accepting the idea that Jesus is the Son of God. All the things that is Messiah, all the things died for our sins, all those things we're participating with these people who we love. We're participating in their prayer, and I would say through respect. And that, for me, and for many that won't, but for me, that unlocked that particular door. Now, I still have red line. I was just in church the other day giving the sermon at the Episcopal church here, and I don't do the creed. The creed to me seems that's too specific, and it doesn't seem honest for me. It's disingenuous for those that know about masses and creeds and things like that. But so much of it is possible. Okay, if you could put up the text. I put it in the chat box for those that want it. You can get it on an email that went out this morning as well. And so are you going to put the text up, Marcia?
Am I not doing it? I'm sorry. Let me, I thought I was putting it up. Okay. Forgive me. Here it is.
And I neglected to translate into English what that psalm says, and that's here in the top. Right. So, praise the Lord, all you nations, extol God, all you peoples, for great is God's steadfast love towards us. The faithfulness of the Lord endures forever. Hallelujah. And Laudate is really only the first line. The song is translated. Many of the Taizé songs are in multiple languages. I used to know how to do it in Swedish. Sjung lov sang alleleden. Sjung. I can't even say it anymore. How does he sing? Sjung? Sjung lov sang alleleden. Anyway, I used to know it in Swedish, right? It was the Christian Swedes were very impressed that I could do that in Swedish. I couldn't do a lot. But in English, it's sing praises, all you peoples. Sing praises to the Lord. Sing praises, all you peoples. Sing praises to the Lord. So let's take a look at the text that I'm going to be bringing hopefully will be connecting the Jewish literary tradition, maybe not throughout the ages, but certainly through the Middle Ages, as we'll see today, and some Christian texts as well, and to some Muslim texts, and some Hindu and Buddhist texts as well. That's my goal. How do we have the encounter with the other while paying attention as well to sacred text? And so Rabbi David Kimchi, who's also known as Radak, I know you guys, many of you have had these wonderful courses with all sorts of teachers from different places, and I wouldn't be surprised if you heard of Radak's name before. David Kimchi, Provence, 12th, 13th century, and while Burgundy is not Provence, it's still not that far away. And so he says this psalm of only 2 verses is intended for the time of the Messiah. The fact that it contains only 2 verses hints that at that time, when the Messiah comes, all nations will be on one of 2 sides. The Israelites will be alone off to one side and their Torah. And all the other nations will be on the other side with their 7 commandments. And everyone will praise the Lord, since at that time all will be thankful. as it is written, so that they all invoke the Lord by name and swerve the Lord with one accord. Now, it's the truth of the matter is it's not all the nations he's talking about. He's talking about those that accept God as being one, and for them who are not genetically Jewish, and this is the mainline traditional Jewish view, those who are not genetically Jewish, and assuming they haven't converted, which wasn't all that prevalent in his time, if they don't accept God as one, then they will perish when Mashiach comes. And how will they accept God as one? Not just by saying Shema Yisrael, right? But by the 7 Noahide commandments. And I'd had a footnote in the original. The footnote got lost. The footnote are the 7 commandments. I didn't bring it here, right? Yeah, the 7 Noahide commandments, and I make a note of this because I can never remember all 7. But perhaps somebody here, Marsha, maybe you'll. We're talking about. So according to rabbinic, it's not in the Torah, right? According to rabbinic tradition, God expects of the rest of humanity to not steal, commit adultery, murder, have a court system, not do idolatry, not eat a limb off of a living animal. Yeah, as bizarre as that is. And I'm missing one. Anybody? Anyway, you look up 7 Noahide commandments. By the way, the Noahides, there's websites devoted to Noahides. Has anybody ever heard of this before? Noahide?
Yes, I'm going to share what they are. And so these are the laws, right? Because,
Thank you.
okay, so it's not worship idols, do
Yeah,
not
first God is the one I missed. Yeah.
curse God, murder. So some of these are.
Some of these are 10 commandments. Some of them are not. Some of the one about the eating the animals is really how do they get to that out of all the things? But what's interesting, if you on your own, we don't need to do it now, but if you Google Noahides, you'll get to a rather extensive website internet presence, and that is all sponsored by Chabad. Chabad has another arm of it, which is outreach to the non-Jews, to the Goyim, so to speak. Which I wasn't aware of until the early 2000s when I was contacted by a Noahide woman from Holland. She had read something about what I was doing. She got in contact with me, and she says, "Well, I'm a Noahide," and so I quickly looked up what is Noahide, and then I found that this is a Chabad thing, and that's interesting unto itself. But that's not, and that's their interfaith dialogue. And that would be interesting to talk to Chabadnikim about where they stand in that, right? That's not their main.
Do they try to convert the Noahides?
No, no. That's just it. It's about Chabad usually don't convert, by the way. In most places,
I know that's why I didn't understand. That's
no,
right.
but conversion. So in this context, is make sure that they do these 7 things, right? But I don't know how that works. I'm not terribly interested in it because that misses the point of what Rita Claire made before, and to me that misses the kavod aspect of it. But okay, it's very chauvinistic. But why am I bringing this? So from a there are not a lot of midrashim on this particular psalm, unfortunately. But in this particular, this says from a Jewish point of view, in 12th, 13th century in France, there's us and them. And that's how it's always been. But it's a vision of us and them in the time to come. The us and them is that they will agree to what they need to. It's our terms, of course. It's us and them on our terms. And I want to be cognizant of this in the Jewish tradition. It's us and them on our terms, and that has hashlachot, implications for so many aspects of our lives as Jews. It's not just the religious one, not just looking towards the Messiah. This idea that there's other two, and then later on in life, in fact, just in the last year or two, when I've been studying about the origins of Christianity in the first few centuries and understanding at least the trend or the school of thought that I'm attracted to in New Testament study, where there was no particular parting of ways, is what it's known in literature, the parting of ways between Christianity and Judaism, that this was it was an extremely complex, complicated, gradual separation. And that even when there were those that spoke on behalf of Christianity, say we are no longer anything to do with the Jews, there were those that were still actively practicing Judaism in a Christian way. And and there are today in a very different way, but with Messianic Jews. And so what this brings up to me is that in Kimchi's world, it is very easy to delineate black and white. Now, that's in the background of this, and in the time to come, in the world to come. And he bases it on the format of the psalm. There's 2 lines, there's 2 verses, which that was kind of new for me, right? Not the words, but the form. And that's an ancient type of form, what we call in biblical studies, form criticism. Okay, it's a little bit of almost humor there, if not. But what it brought out to me when I began to go into depth, and I began to study the psalm as soon as I got back, because I'd been invited to make a presentation to speak at Limud in England that December. So I already was still buzzing from this. Is that I wanted to say this is what I'm not, and I often use. Many of you know that I am all about studying everything in our tradition, the stuff that we like and the stuff that we don't like. And when it comes to halakha, I am all about studying the entire section of the Shulchan Aruch about a particular issue that I'm dealing with, Rabbi Yosef Karo's comprehensive work of Jewish law, together with Moshe Isserlich, 16th, 17th century. I'm all about studying it, even if it says something that I'm going to do exactly the opposite, because sometimes I know to do the opposite because I've seen somebody say you should do this. That brings up a certain issue. My quintessential example of that is when I was working with the AIDS task force in Israel in the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, and began to teach the topic of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick, which was not a topic in rabbinical school at all. When I was in rabbinical school, it wasn't at Schechter in Israel, and it wasn't at HUC in Jerusalem. I know because I was asked to start that section of the curriculum in the early aughts, and looking at the Shulchan Aruch about the laws of visiting the sick, says specifically you're not allowed. It's forbidden to sit on the bed together with the sick person. I'm thinking to myself, if there's one thing I can do to somebody who has days or months left, who's dying of AIDS, that was the early 90s. There's one thing I can do to comfort that person is to sit on their bed and hold their hand. And so sometimes you have to see the opposite in order to understand what you do, what you need to do. Okay. Would somebody volunteer to read Paul's Romans 15 here in number 3?
I'll read it.
Go ahead.
In a word, accept one another as Christ accepted us, to the glory of God. I mean that Christ became a servant of the Jewish people to maintain the truth of God by making good his promises to the patriarchs, and at the same time to give the Gentiles cause to glorify God for his mercy. As scriptures say, therefore I will praise thee among the Gentiles and sing hymns to thy name. All Gentiles praise the Lord. Let all people praise him.
So using the same text in a very, very different way, I would imagine most people here know Paul, born a Jew, persecuting early Christians, believers in the disciples of Christ, and then having a theophany or epiphany on the road to Damascus, etc., and being a central figure in spreading Christianity, right? And but using that psalm in a very, very different way. The psalm becomes something that is not about there is us and them on our terms, but there's all of us on our terms, which became that the call to not only to the Jewish people, but to all of humanity. And in learning these things before I was immersed as much as I am, and I'm still a novice, I would say, New Testament studies. I mean, this was like, I had never looked at this kind of stuff before, but this was important. I need to understand how we hold the same text sacred, and yet we go in different directions with it, and not to say, well, that's them. And I can't say that as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of the propaganda right now during the war. I'm thinking of everything, right? It is to be open to investigate, to try to learn what are they saying, and not only say, well, that's them and we're us, which is what we often do, but what might I find? And this is a good time for me to bring up something I saw on an early email. And I didn't realize the time. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to. So I'll end with this story now. An early email, listserv of the Rabbinical Assembly, or the RA. Somebody quoted Professor Avi Ravitsky of Tel Aviv, who I didn't know at the time. Afterwards, I did study with him in the early aughts. I had a course with him, and I asked him if this is true, because can I say this in your name? And he said yes. He says, Ravitsky teaches that there are three terms that we want to consider. We want to consider tolerance, pluralism, and openness. Tolerance is when I have my view and my next door neighbor is a Christian. Oh, let's do it. I vote Democrat, my next door neighbor votes Trump, and we don't kill each other. We don't throw things at each other, right? We don't unplug each other's electricity, whatever it is, right? We don't menace each other. That's tolerance. Pluralism is, I have my view. I'm a lifelong Democrat, whatever. My neighbor is a lifelong Republican and is voting for Trump. And I understand that that is his truth. My truth is my truth, but I understand that is his truth. We don't do that all that often when you think of it, right? We often want to say, well, they're just wrong. No. We have to try to understand that for them, that is their truth. And that is where listening comes in. But then Ravitsky says, but what I'm really interested in is openness. I want to see how I have my view. My neighbor has their view. And I get into their view and see, well, what might there be for me in this view? What might I learn here? What might I adopt for myself? That doesn't mean assimilation. That doesn't mean giving in on your principles. That is a lofty goal. And when I saw that, and that was already in the 90s, because I stopped being on RavNet in the 90s already, in the late 90s. When I saw that, I said, that is my credo. And that's one of the things. I'm going to repeat that throughout the next four weeks as well. I'm going to repeat something that the former bishop and then academic at Yale, Christopher Stendhal, taught us about interfaith dialogue. But for now, what I'm going to say is that this kind of study, this kind of dialogue is crucial for us to get by, and it's crucial even this week. Some will say it's not the time for interfaith dialogue now. I wish there was an imam near me who I was close enough to say, I'm coming on Friday to pray with you. I just don't have that relationship with the mosque in Coachella right now, but I wish there was. This would be the Friday to the main prayer at 1 o'clock, the Juma. This would be the Friday. All right, folks. We look forward to better times. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for that beautiful lesson. Very healing and insightful. I hope we can pick up, David, with the end of this source sheet next week, and we'll run with the next one. And may there be less to process, God willing, at the start of our session. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And
thank you.
It will be wonderful to study together this month during this very, very difficult time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.